There's a point in a lot of people's careers when they realize that something doesn't add up. They've put in the time, they've developed real expertise, they've helped people get real results, but the recognition, the opportunities, the consistent flow of clients, it's just not there. And it's not because they're not capable, it's because no one ever taught them how to position themselves as the authority. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 11 personal branding principles that are fundamental to becoming a thought leader. Principles that if you get right, they don't just improve your marketing, they change how your entire career unfolds. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly what it takes to position yourself as the go-to authority in your space. Let's dive right in. Okay, so we're really talking about building true thought leadership, expertise turned into thought leadership. Most of the people I work with don't struggle with purpose. That's actually where they're winning. They know who they are, they know what they stand for, they know what gifts they have, and they feel a real sense of responsibility to use those gifts to make a difference. So the problem isn't that they lack purpose, it's that their purpose stops there. It's internal, it's personal, but it's not fully defined in a way that translates into how they build their life and their business. Their real purpose isn't just about who you care about, it's about clarity. Clarity around who you're meant to help, why you're meant to help them, and how that fits into the life that you actually want to live. What are your priorities? What role does your business play in your life? Do you want freedom? Do you want financial growth? What matters most? Family, health, faith, personal development? So these aren't separate from your brand, they shape it. And this is where I see a big disconnect. There's a lot of advice out there that just says, just do what you love and the money will follow. Now that sounds good, but it's quite incomplete. Doing what you love without structure, without clarity, without alignment, doesn't create any type of sustainable business. Your purpose needs to be defined in a way that guides you, not just an inspiration. Because when your purpose is clear at that level, then everything else becomes easier. When you serve, what you talk about, what you say no to, this is all the foundation. The next principle is defining your target audience. And this is one of the biggest areas where people hold themselves back. Not because they don't understand it, but because they resist it. Most people don't want to narrow down. When you're trying to grow your business, when you're trying to generate income, it feels like narrowing down your audience means turning away opportunities. It feels like you're limiting yourself, but the reality is the opposite. When you stay broad, you stay invisible. You blend in with everyone else in your space. You become one of many options instead of the obvious choice. But when you narrow down your focus, when you clearly define who you serve, you give yourself the ability to own that space to the point where people in that niche, they start to see you as the authority. This changes everything for you. Your message becomes more clear, your content becomes more relevant, and your lead generation becomes much more consistent. Now, to define your audience, it isn't just about saying, this person is my dream client. It's about understanding why. Why are they a great fit for you? What makes them different from everyone else? What results have you helped them achieve? And if you've worked with several great clients, ask yourself, if I could choose just one type of client to work with more, which one would that be? And why? What's the difference? This is where your clarity starts. And I want to say this because a lot of people dismiss this idea. You've probably heard niche down before. It's not new, but hearing it and doing it are two different things. Have you actually done it? Have you truly committed to defining your audience at that level? If you don't go at that level, then you're going to continue spinning your wheels. You'll keep taking whatever comes your way. You'll keep settling. But when you claim your niche, you position yourself to own it. And that's when your business can really take off. The next principle is expertise, and this is one of the most misunderstood parts of becoming a thought leader. A lot of people think expertise comes from knowledge, but that's only the first part of it. We all have expertise, but the question is what level? To become a thought leader, you need to be a level 3 expert. So let me explain what that means. Level 1 of expertise is knowledge. This is where you've learned everything. You've read the books, you've taken the courses, you might even have a degree or a PhD. You've had the conversations, you might have even done a lot of personal research. So at this point, you can talk the talk, but that doesn't actually mean you can get results. So level 2 is when you start to apply that knowledge. You go out into the real world and you implement it. You figure out what works and what doesn't. You get the bumps and the bruises. You fail, you adjust, and eventually you succeed. So you've gone from point A to point B, and at that point, you're a level 2 expert. You don't just have knowledge anymore, you have experience, you have wisdom, and you've achieved a result. But level 3 takes it a step further. This is where you help someone else achieve that same result. So they start at point A, and you guide them through the obstacles to get to point B. Not based on your exact situation, but based on theirs, which means you have to understand how to communicate with them and how to adapt your process, how to solve problems that are different from the ones that you faced. And when you can do that consistently, you're now at a level 3 expertise. This is where everything changes for your ability to become a thought leader. You're not just someone who knows or someone who has done it, but you're someone who can help others succeed. That's what the marketplace values. That's what people are searching for. So if you can take somebody by the hand and help them reach the finish line, then you've already qualified yourself to be a thought leader. Now it just becomes a matter of positioning, narrowing your focus, owning your category, and allowing people to find you. The next principle is understanding the problem you solve and the solution you provide. So this is where I see a lot of people get it wrong. They focus on what they do instead of what results they create. They say things like, I'm a coach, or we meet weekly. I guide you through a process, but that's not what people are buying. They don't buy your process, they don't buy your sessions, they don't buy your method, but they buy the outcome. They want to know, if I work with you, where am I going to end up? What does success look like? Am I starting at point A, and are you the person who can get me to point B? That's all that matters. So instead of leading your conversations with how you do it, you need to lead with what it does. What is the transformation? What problem are you solving? And what result are you consistently helping people achieve? When you have clarity on that and they have clarity on that, everything changes. Your message becomes stronger, your content becomes more compelling, your audience understands exactly why they should pay attention to you. So this doesn't mean that your method isn't important. It's obviously important, but your method supports the outcome. It's not the headline. The headline is the result. You're here, and I can help you get here. And when you can communicate that clearly, you make it really easy for the right people to say, that's exactly what I need. The next principle is your uniqueness, your method. Okay, this is your system. This is where people tend to get confused. They think that they need to come up with something completely new, something revolutionary, something that no one has ever seen before, and that's not the goal. Your uniqueness comes from how you do what you do, your experience, your perspective, your process, and what's important here is that you create a system around it. How did you get from point A to point B? What steps did you take? What did you learn along the way? And how can you organize that into something repeatable, something that other people can follow? Because if you can systematize your process, you make it easier for others to succeed. You're not just giving advice anymore, you're leading people down a path. It's a clear, structured path, and when you do that, it becomes something you can name, something people can recognize, something they associate with you. That becomes your system, that becomes your method. Now, let's remember the important distinction. When you're marketing yourself, you don't lead with this uniqueness, you don't lead with your method, but you lead with that outcome. Behind the scenes, your method is what makes that outcome possible. It's what allows you to deliver results consistently. So while your audience is buying the result, your system was what gives you confidence to deliver it. And over time, that system becomes a part of your identity, it reinforces your authority, and it's what allows you to scale your impact. The next principle is your visual identity, how you look. And this is the area that most people tend to focus on first. A lot of marketing experts just focus on this when they're talking about personal branding. Your logo, your website, your colors, your professional photography. And I want to be clear, this stuff does matter. You want to present yourself well. You want to look like the expert that you are. You want your brand to feel professional and credible. It's all important, but this is not where thought leadership comes from. If all you had was a great logo, a beautiful website, professional photos, that doesn't make you a thought leader. It doesn't give you any positioning and it doesn't bring you clients. So this is where people get it backwards. They think that this is step one, So they invest time and money trying to get everything perfect before they've built the foundation, before they've defined their audience, before they've proven their expertise, before they've clarified the problem they solve. You don't need any of the visual pieces to become a thought leader. You can start without it, and in many cases you should, because what matters most is that you're creating value. You're creating results for your clients and you're positioning yourself correctly. As you start generating revenue, then you can reinvest, you can improve your visuals, you can elevate your branding, but you do it strategically, you do it at the right time, not all at once and not at the beginning. So yes, your visual identity matters, but it supports your authority, it doesn't create it. The next principle is content. How you share your value. And this is where almost everyone gets it wrong. Most people think that content is about posting on social media, sharing updates, talking about their credentials, posting testimonials or case studies. Now, those things aren't bad, but when you're posting them on social media or sending them out in emails, you're mostly talking to people who already know you. That's not marketing, that's nurturing. And nurturing is important, but it doesn't grow your authority. It doesn't bring in new people. In fact, a lot of times you're just repeating the same message to the same audience. But content, when it's done right, does something very different. It positions you in front of people who have never heard of you before, people who are actively searching for answers, people who are already looking for the solutions that you provide. And this is happening every day. There are people all around the world right now searching for your expertise. They just don't know that you exist. But if your content is positioned correctly, they find you, not because you interrupted them, but because you showed up when they were looking. That builds authority. That's what personal branding is. It's positioning, and your content is the vehicle that gets you there. When your content is aligned with what your audience is searching for, you don't have to chase attention. You don't have to convince people. You become the answer that they are already looking for. And that's how you start to show up at the top of your category. That's how you begin to own your space. The next principle is a fun one to talk about. It's your bias and your opinions. This is what makes your content stand out, because your content cannot be generic. It can't be a consensus of what everyone else is saying online. If it is, there's no reason to follow you and there's no reason to choose you. And pay attention to this, your content can't be created by AI. It has to come from you, your experiences, your perspective, the way that you see things, because over time you've learned lessons. You've developed opinions. You see patterns that other people don't see. That's where your bias comes from. And that's actually why people hire you. They don't hire you for neutral information. They hire you for how you think. So here's where people get uncomfortable. When you share your opinions, you turn some people away. And that's what people are afraid of. You want to appeal to everyone. You want to stay safe. But if you're not turning anyone away, you're also not drawing anyone in. So clarity creates attraction. It also creates separation, and that's a very good thing, because the right people will hear you and think, that's exactly how I see it. That's exactly what I need. And that's the person you want to work with. So you don't have to feel like you need to perform. You don't have to copy someone else. You don't have to sound like you're another expert. You don't have to become anything different. So you just get to be yourself. Now, this isn't putting pressure on you to be authentic. It's about removing that pressure. You already have a voice. You already have a perspective. You just need to be willing to share it. The next principle is consistency, and that's what really allows momentum to build, because when you do this right, you start to show up everywhere. Now, when I say everywhere, I don't mean social media. I mean everywhere people search, on Google, on YouTube, and AI tools like ChatGPT. When someone is looking for answers in your space, they keep seeing you at the top and the top again and again. And that's what builds authority. So consistency isn't just about how often you post. It's not just about frequency, but it's about alignment. When somebody finds you on YouTube and then goes to your website, it should feel like the same person, the same message, the same positioning. If they find you on LinkedIn, it should reinforce what they already saw. So you need to have consistency everywhere and not confuse people, not feel disconnected. Everything should point in the same direction. And here's the most important part. If you really want to dominate your category, if you want to be the go-to authority in your space, you need to create a lot of the right content. So not just more content, but the right content. Because a lot of people already have volume. They already have hundreds of posts, videos, articles, but they're not positioned as a thought leader. It wasn't aligned with what their audience is actually searching for. So if you can create content around every major question that your dream clients are asking, you can show up consistently for those searches. That's how you secure your position. That's how you become the person that they keep seeing. And when that happens, you're no longer competing, you own your category. The next principle I want to talk about is credibility and proof. And this is what really builds trust. At the end of the day, people don't hire you based on what you say. They hire you based on what you've done. And more importantly, what you've helped others do and achieve. So early on, when I discovered my strategy, I believed in it. I had tested it in small ways and I could see what could become from it, but I didn't have a track record on a large scale. I didn't have a large scale case study that I could point to. So when I talked to people about this new approach, they couldn't see what I saw. So I had to do something different. I partnered with 2 clients. I offered to do the work for free. In exchange, we would share future profits. So they took a risk with me, and those 2 businesses, they didn't just grow, but they exploded. They totally flourished. They became massive thought leaders. We completely owned the category, and that changed everything. Because now I didn't have to persuade people. I didn't have to convince them. They could see the results. And that's what proof does. It removes resistance. So here's what's important. You don't need to push what you do. You don't need to promote yourself consistently. But as you create content, as you answer questions, when there's an opportunity to show a result, then show it. If you have a case study that illustrates what you're teaching, use it. A case study shows people what it actually looks like to work with you without you having to talk about yourself. It lets them see the transformation. It lets them see what's possible, and that's what builds real trust. The final principle I want to share is category ownership. This is where everything comes together, because when you do all of this right, you don't just participate in your space, you literally own it. Now, a lot of people don't believe that this is possible for them. You'll go online, you'll search your topic on Google, YouTube, or even ChatGPT, and you'll see the same names at the top. People like Simon Sinek, or Brian Tracy, or Tony Robbins, people like that, and they think, there's no way I can compete with that. There's no way I can rank at the top of my space. But that's not actually how this works. Category ownership isn't about competing with everyone. It's about really defining your space and owning it. And there is a clear tactical path to doing this. It's not based on luck. It's not based on going viral. It's not about hoping that something works. Everything that I teach is strategic. It's planned. You map it out. You identify what your audience is searching for, and you systematically create the content to show up for those searches. And when you do that, you start to take ground. You start to show up more and more until eventually you're the one that people keep seeing. And I've seen this over and over again. In fact, I've even found ways to outrank some of the biggest names in the world by narrowing down the focus and owning a specific category. Now, when you reach that point, you're no longer chasing opportunities. You become the go-to thought leader in your space. Now, if you want to see what this actually looks like in practice and how to do it step by step, I break that down in another episode called Achieve Category Dominance. In that episode, I'm going to show you real examples so you can visualize it and you can start to see how this could work for you. I'll see you in that episode.